Good morning, fellow students, teachers and faculty staff. Je voudrais commencer par remercier tous les membres de l'association étudiante de Law Society and Justice, les organisatrices de la Social Science Week, ainsi que le coordonnateur du programme de Law Society and Justice, M. Ted Irwin, qui ont tous eu à jouer un rôle important dans l'organisation de cette présentation ce matin. It is a great honor for me to have the opportunity of introducing to you our next guest speaker, Mr. Jean-François Lisée, journalist, political advisor, author, and deputy of the Provincial Electoral District of Rosemont. Mr. Lisée has worn many hats in his career. For more than 30 years now, he has been actively reflecting on the future of Quebec. Since October of last year, he took a step further and became the leader of the official opposition in Quebec, le Parti Québécois. A Thetford Mines native and father of 5, Monsieur Lisée is an adept of an effective left and believes in a nationalism adapted for the 21st century. We would like to remind the audience that the talk will be followed by a 15-minute question period where questions by students will be privileged and there will be no follow-ups. With that being said, here to present us more about his vision for Quebec, please join me in welcoming Monsieur Jean-François Lisée.
Well, thank you, Denise. It's a great pleasure for me to be here at Dawson. As I once stated in front of the President Dean, a jewel of the Quebec education system. Vous me permettez de saluer les organisateurs, Vivienne Watson, Nancy Rebello, les remercier pour leur invitation. And like you, I think from the shock of ideas sprang forth light. So I'm grateful for the invitation. All my life, as a journalist in Paris, Washington, a political aide, a scholar, a member of National Assembly, a minister, and now as the leader of the Parti Québécois, I've worked so that new ideas would breed for the benefit of all. For many years, I was seen as a bit of an iconoclast, a straight shooter, someone who would speak truth to power. It was my trademark, and I'm damn proud of it. Now, as a leader of the independence movement, the shock of ideas is as important for me as ever, and I will gladly accept invitations to engage in debate as I'm doing today. First, a few words about the terrible events that struck Quebec City. On that day, 6 men lost their life, victims of hatred, contempt, and ignorance. On Sunday, the 29th, 20 kids were left without fathers, without a steady hand to guide their life. Then almost immediately, those kids gained a community. In Quebec City and elsewhere in Quebec, people grieved together, mourned together, and grew closer. And I know that for people in this community, the Dawson community, those meaningless violent acts hit closer to home. As your director, Richard Fillon, said, we know how people feel because we felt the same not so long ago. Lest we forget. Now, I wanted to come here today and tell you a bit about my plan for 2017-2018. It's fairly simple. It fits in 2 words. Rediscover us. Rediscover, or discover for some of you, the Parti Québécois. It's not your grandfather's Parti Québécois. And some of you are too young to remember the Oldsmobile ad, which was, it's not your grandfather's Oldsmobile. So we always have to adapt to new cohorts. Où est-ce qu'on a mis les c'est juste après? On va faire les graphiques? Okay. Well, first discover us. So what has the PQ done for Quebec before today? There are a few very little known facts about the contribution of Parti Québécois governments. One is about the economy. So let's look at the figures. This is the GDP average for each time the PQ and the Liberal Party passed into power. Okay, now you're taping and re-listening to it now. You can listen to it tomorrow. There's more to come. Okay. So this is the average growth for the Lévesque government until 84. Then the average growth for the Bourassa Liberal government that followed. Then the average growth for the PQ government that followed. And that the average growth for the Liberal government that followed. And then for the one-year PQ and the current Liberal government. We didn't factor in the fact that GDP shrunk 0.4% last October. That's the last figure we have. So let's look at the average for the Liberals and for the PQ. Little known facts. On average, growth of the economy under the PQ is greater than under the Liberals. And that's despite the fact that we passed language laws and tried to get out of Canada twice in that period. Imagine, had we kept calm, what would we had achieved? But the other thing I'm very proud of is the impact of PQ government policies on poverty. So let's look at the average between the Canadian poverty average in red and the Quebec poverty average, and see that under the last period of PQ governments between 94 and 2003, we witnessed the greatest decline of poverty anywhere in North America. And it's not that it was declining elsewhere and we took the train. It's that it declined here much more than elsewhere because we built the train to a more egalitarian society. When the Liberals are there, it goes up and down. When the PQ is there, it goes down. And that for me is very important because a number of people are saying, well, you put too much emphasis on poverty, there's always going to be poor, and let's only focus on growth. I say no. When we focus on less poverty, it does work. And it means that we can do even better. I mean, our aim is to have as little poverty in Quebec as they do in Norway, which is the least in the world. If they can do it, we can do it. If we could shrink it like this, we can go further. And that's our aim. So historically, we've been the party of great reforms. PQ founder René Lévesque noted that corrupt money circumvented the laws, and he pushed for, at the time, the cleanest political funding legislation in North America. Corrupt people are very, very resourceful, so they found ways to go around it. So under Pauline Marois, we pushed further, and now we have the newest, best anti-corruption financing electoral law in North America, and I think in Europe, and we applied it to cities where corrupt money was running amok for a while. Pauline Marois created universal daycare for children in Quebec and thus allowed tens of thousands of women to get out of their homes and back to work. And that's why when you compare Quebec to the rest of Canada, immigrant women are more involved in the workplace in Quebec than elsewhere. Why is that? Low-cost universal daycare. That's the measure of liberation. 20 years ago, equity pay in the public sector and the private sector were introduced by a PQ government. Nowhere else in North America are women working in the private sector covered by a law on equity pay. This is the PQ's doing in Quebec. It was under Premier Landry that we created the business environment needed by the video games industry here in Montreal and in Quebec. And this industry was built around innovative support of the state for the employees, to fund the employees. And when we introduced that, we were told it was folly by the Liberals and others. And this folly brought Montreal to be one of the most important places in the world for video games and for special effects. Most of the things destroyed in Hollywood movies are destroyed here by us. It makes us so proud. Along the way, we lost, the PQ, some of our original spark. On many subjects, we were not as clear as we should have been. We wavered. Were we still the great left of center party we once were? Where were we exactly? On the environment, of course, our founder, René Lévesque, founded Hydro-Québec, the greatest, we didn't call it green at the time, but it was the biggest, greatest green thing we could have done in the 60s. And then becoming premier in 76, he created the Department of the Environment. Didn't exist. And on agriculture, preserving the lands from developers, that was a great thing that he did. And the first wave of purifying water was under the PQ. And then under Pauline Marois, Lucien Bouchard, we dabbled into oil for a while. And so some of our environmental friends in the youth said, well, where are you? Are you for oil or for a green Quebec? And so we turned that page last year when all of the candidates for leadership said, no, we want to leave oil behind. We want to prevent Anticosti. We don't want to pump oil from there. We want to go straight to be an exemplary nation in the fight against global warming. And so we reconnected with our environmental roots. You want to say voting blue, which is our color, next time around, is voting green. On the referendum, people say, well, when is it going to be? Well, that's a fair question, because it's a big issue. And for a couple of political cycles, we said, well, we'll see. We're not quite sure. We'll determine. And they said, well, how will you determine? Well, we're not quite sure. So a lot of people said, well, figure it out and call back. Figure it out and call back. And I think it was a very wise thing to say. So we figured it out. We decided, and we saw, that although for us, an independent Quebec is the best thing that could happen, there are not enough of us that think that right now for us to engage in this debate. And even among those who feel it should be done, most of them say it's not the right time. The most important thing we can do for the health of Quebec, for the ethics of Quebec, for the development of Quebec, for the environment of Quebec, is to get rid of the most inept liberal government in the history of liberal governments, some of whom were not inept at all. But this bunch is really giving a bad name to the liberal brand. So we need for Quebec to put them in a position for a while, let them regenerate, like the Borg do. You know about the Borg? Okay. Some of you did watch Star Trek Next Generation. Just on the front row, I think. And so they'll be back. The Liberal Party is a great party of the history of Quebec. It contributed tremendously, and it will in the future. But this bunch is not of the same cloth. So we say, okay, we will make this difficult decision for an independence party to say that in the next mandate, from 2018 to 2022, there will not be a referendum on sovereignty. We will not spend a dime of government money on the issue of independence. But in 2022, we give notice, we will ask for a mandate to bring Quebec to independence then. Then you can vote for or against then. And in the meantime, as an independence movement, not as a government, as a movement, we will try to convince you that this would be a good thing. But at least we'll have these 4 years where people who felt trapped in voting Liberal because they didn't want a referendum are free. I'm no Moses, but I'm saying, let my people go. I'm telling the Liberals, let my people go. They know you're not good, but you kept them because of the fear of a referendum. But we're taking this fear away. And let's build something forever, for good, for 4 years. Of course, we wish to grow closer in these 4 years and to try and bring you to do the next steps. But it's going to be the choice of the people to come along or not to come along. Where am I? That's good. I said that. I said that. I said that. Many of you were not born in Canada. Raise your hands, those who were not born in Canada. That's a lot. Well, welcome. Thanks for being here. Unemployment in Quebec for newcomers is 10%. For people arriving from North Africa, 17%. Almost the double. And I can't help but say that Liberals were in power in the 15 of the last 16 years. Philippe Couillard himself admitted to the Gazette last December that he lost touch with the Anglo community. Now, I don't want you to take this personally, because he also lost touch with the French community. So it doesn't mean you specifically harm, you know, it's just, he's an equal opportunity losing touch guy. Okay? And clearly, we need to introduce robust measures to close the gap of unemployment or employment between newcomers and Quebecers. The gap is too wide. So last Monday, I thought it was fitting, given the goodwill that was produced by these tragic events, to say, okay, let's go from horror to pain to sharing to action. And action means getting policies right for newcomers to have their skills recognized, to have their diplomas recognized, to have their work experience recognized, and to get into the workforce. Our Ontario neighbors in 2013 made it illegal for employers to ask for previous Canadian work experience in order to get a job. Well, of course, you just got here. Even after 10 years of working in your home country, you have no previous Canadian work experience, but you have previous work experience. And this being an eliminatory clause pushed people to unemployment without cause. So in Ontario, it's illegal now. I asked the Premier Tuesday, let's make it illegal now, here in Quebec. He said, we'll look into it. I said, okay, I'm going to ask you again next week, and then next week. I said, listen, it's a maze. It's an amazing maze for newcomers who want to have their skills recognized. There's no single path. There's no single wicket where you can go and say, this is the path. And we have some people who could have had certificates in a year that were sent to 3-year programs, and they lost time, and they lost money. So we must act. Discrimination and racism at work and in lodging is intolerable. I work on the tobacco bill. And the tobacco bill, if a dépanneur, which I understand is a word used by Anglo-Montrealers, if a dépanneur sells cigarettes to a minor, he can be fined for the first offense up to $60,000. And the health department hires young women in the summer that look 24 but are 17 and send them to dépanneur to catch them in the act of not asking for identification. And so the dépanneurs are titanized by this possibility. This young woman, what if she's an inspector? So they're asking for ID. Now what if the owner of lodging looked at this black would-be tenant that has a perfect file, and he doesn't want, for discriminatory reason, to rent this guy and his family? What if he said he could be an inspector from the Régie du Logement? I could be fined $60,000 for not letting him in. I think it would go a long way. And the same is true for employment. So there are things we know we could do now to make a real difference. And so I called on the Premier to have a bipartisan task and pass legislation and change rules before June. to make sure that we make a great leap forward in integration and beat back racism and discrimination in Quebec. Let's talk about French. I think we have a problem here, and you're not the problem. The Quebec Community Group Network recently measured that half of young Anglophones they surveyed didn't feel that they could work in a French environment. So I'm going to ask you, and be truthful, how many of you tomorrow, if you were in a big firm in Montreal, could in short order write a proper memo in French? Raise your hand. That's pretty good. And now those who couldn't, raise your hand. That's too many. So we're failing you guys. We're failing you guys. We're going to have a crop, and we're having each year a crop of people getting out of English CEGEPs and English universities with great skills, very competent. But they get into the workforce and they feel that they're not fitting in because they're not like fish in water in a French work environment. It's as though we were giving them their diplomas with a ticket to Toronto. So of course a number of you will want to have careers in Toronto, in New York, in Bali, in Jakarta, and that's great. You know, I was abroad for 10 years before coming back. And I'm going to tell you one thing now. Once you get babies, this is the best place to have babies, okay? Come back for the family policies. Come back for the free toy every winter that is snow in your backyard, okay? This is the great free toy that I'm committed to sending you this free toy every winter. But of course you're going to do some of your career elsewhere and bring back the knowledge that you have. But it has to be a choice. It shouldn't be because you didn't fit in. It shouldn't be because you couldn't succeed here. So let's look at some of these figures. So this is the mobility of graduates just between Quebec and Canada, not even the rest of the world, age 25 to 29 in the census of 2006. So these are the ones from the rest of Canada coming here. These are the graduates from Quebec having gone to the rest of Canada, and this is the net balance. So we're losing. We're in the losing end. We're exporting people here that have skills and diplomas. Now, there are many reasons, but I think one of the reasons is that we are not giving sufficiently the skill of succeeding here. And that is a big loss. Alors oui, je propose un test de français obligatoire pour l'obtention d'un diplôme postsecondaire ou d'une institution anglophone, cégep ou université. We have to make sure that when you're done with your studies, you can succeed here. Launch your startups here. How many of you want to launch his own enterprise? Let's have a show of hands. Not enough. You guys, I know you already have your enterprise. Don't mess with the statistics. The Parti Québécois want to work hand in hand with community leaders in order to write this course. And I know that this might feel discordant, but I warn you, this is not your grandfather's PQ. I want strong measures to protect French in the workplace in Quebec. I want people to speak in English, Mandarin, or Spanish on the phone with clients all over the world. But then, when you hang up, the common language is and should be French. It is only normal for the only French government body in America to want to keep and promote its difference. But never, never at the expense of its historic Anglo community. What if we proposed students in English CEGEPs to have an enriched French track that would go at the end to a full session in a French CEGEP, here in Montreal or in the regions? What if we proposed to French students in French CEGEPs to have an enriched Anglo track that will culminate in a full session in an English CEGEP, like this one? That would be a great thing, to be operational in a second language, to grow closer. That's a measure of civic nationalism. What if you spent, a session in the Saguenay, or in Gaspésie, or in Abitibi? There are things there you don't know about. I see these guys laughing. I mean, they laugh a lot in Gaspésie, you know. You would find like-minded people. Now, let's turn to something that makes me very, very happy, is the proportion of people who think they want to start their business. In 2009, it was 7% of the adult population, which is pretty low compared to the rest of Canada or the United States or even Turkey. Let's look at 2016. 21% of the adult population, 32% of immigrants. Now that's a powerful amount of people who want to create wealth for themselves and for the nation. 18 to 34-year-olds, 42%. Now, they're not well represented in this room, but clearly we are on the edge of a great entrepreneurial generation in Quebec, and we can't miss the mark. We want these startups here, and that's why I'm promoting a very strong set of proposals to make it easier for the first 5 years of the startups to have a lighter regulatory load, a lighter fiscal load, and to make sure that now you've seen the ads for these insurance companies that will forget 3 times. So why can't we have a bureaucracy, you know, that is a bit zen about the fact that a young entrepreneur focused on building his business, producing a good product, and finding his clients, that maybe they missed their payment of GST and TVQ by a month. It's okay. We're going to forget 3 times, no, at least, because it's your first 5 years and you're focused on creating something for Quebec. I think there's a lot to be done. If we have this aim that we want full participation of non-Francophones into the success of Quebec today and tomorrow. They are a great force. They are a great strength. You are a great force and strength. We are a great force and strength. And we have to find ways not to set you apart, but to get you in. And that means more representation of diversity in our party, in the government, in the civil service, in the culture, in places of power. This is the right thing to do, because that's the good thing to do. And this Parti Québécois wants to do this with you. Thank you very much.
So we would like to thank Mr. Lisée for this talk he just gave us. We will now be looking favorably upon students' questions. If you could just line up at the mic. Please keep the questions short. There are no follow-ups. We want to get as much people as we can to ask questions.
Is your name and what you're studying in it?
Hi, my name's Tristan. I'm studying mechanical engineering technology, and I would like to know what's the relevance of independence for newcomers and English-speaking Quebec citizens?
Well, the thrill of being the founders of a new country. That's one thing. And when I look at I have friends in the Democratic Party in the U.S., fewer in the Republican Party, and those that I had are no longer there. And they say, you know, the United States we strive for is what Quebec is doing. Stronger laws to protect women, stronger laws to protect the consumers, a green policy environment. I mean, this is what we would like the U.S. to be. And of course, you speak French, and that's trendy in the U.S., you know. They say la yogourt. I mean, it's le yogourt, but they find it sounds more French to say la yogourt. I don't know why. Okay? And clearly, I mean, we're in a country, just on the environment, that is an oil-producing country. One of the first order of business in Ottawa now, even by this young, trendy guy, Justin Trudeau, is to bring the most polluting oil in the world to market. That's his policy. And we don't think that the most polluting oil in the world should be brought to market, because if we burn it, global warming will be irreversible. If all the tar sands oil in Alberta is brought to market, global warming will be irreversible. So this is a big difference between our outlook and the outlook of the rest of Canada. We do feel, and we could debate this for hours, that the economic setup of Canada is such that the investment with our money into productive means in the rest of Canada is greater than in Quebec. And we saw it this week when Bombardier, who was on the brink of bankruptcy last year, asked for help, didn't get it, and finally only got a loan. When the Ontario auto industry was on the brink of bankruptcy in 2008, they got $10 billion from the federal government, not in loans, but in risk-taking, in equity. And actually, the government lost 15% of that risk. And so that's 38 times more than for Quebec. And even though they gave us this very small loan, all hell broke loose in Ottawa with the Conservatives and the Toronto press saying that you shouldn't have given a cent to Bombardier. So we're in a country that goes investing in tar sands, in the auto industry, in the Newfoundland hydro project, in shipbuilding in Halifax and in British Columbia, but it's never Quebec's turn. So they send us equalization money. They send us assistance sociale. And then they despise us because we get it. I'd like to get out of this vicious circle.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm Eric. I'm in Law, Society, and Justice. My question would be, would you reverse liberal austerity measures, and would you run a deficit?
I would reverse austerity measures, sure. I think it's been, they took out $3 billion worth of the GDP for 3 years, and this is one of the places in the world that has the worst austerity policies except for Greece. And our economy would grow better without these measures. I think when we're growing at a sufficient pace, we shouldn't get into deficits. They are to be used when we're in a recession, to use as a buffer for people not to fall into poverty. But if, and actually we're not running a deficit now, we're running a surplus because we're putting $2 billion a year in what is called the Fund of Generations. It's the aim is to lighter, to get the load of the debt to be lighter over time. My take is that if we feel that growth is too slow, to keep unemployment low, we can use some of these investments in the Generation Fund to further more growth. And this would give us, the revenues needed not to be in austerity measures. Now, clearly what the Liberals did, and I thought the most shocking part, was when we had reports saying that the cuts were hurting handicapped people and autistic children. Official reports, not opposition reports, official reports. And the Premier got a report from the Finance Department saying, we already have zero deficit. We're starting to run a surplus. And he didn't say, stop cutting. He said, keep cutting. And the surplus ran up to $2 billion. And so I asked him, why didn't you say stop? You had your goal. He said, no, I wanted to have a surplus to make sure, that I would have a buffer, while your buffer was taken out of the misery of thousands of people in Quebec.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Demetrius. I'm also in Law, Society and Justice as Eric. I would like to ask you, you mentioned many language policies about trying to make English Quebecers speak French better and more. Do you not think that precisely because English Quebecers are forced to work in another language, to see their own language printed in a smaller font, etc., that they choose to live in their own homeland?
That they choose to live or leave?
Leave.
Leave, okay. I think Quebec is your homeland. And this homeland has characteristics that cannot be found in the rest of North America. It is the only place where French is the official and common language. Of course, if you don't want to be in a place where French is the official common language, you will feel ill at ease. So I'm saying, stay, get over it. This is the place. fit in, and we're going to have a good time.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Mélissa. Permettez-moi de vous adresser en français.
Bien sûr.
Apparu dernièrement dans la presse, je cite, « Les événements de Québec ne doivent pas chambouler la vie québécoise. Les débats sur la laïcité, sur l'identité restent légitimes, estiment Jean-François Lisée et François Legault. » Ma question serait, en quoi le débat sur la laïcité et sur l'identité reste légitime pour la vie québécoise?
Je pense que les questions de laïcité sont légitimes dans toute l'histoire du Québec, dans toute l'histoire des États-Unis, dans toute l'histoire du monde. Toute société a à trouver son point d'équilibre entre la volonté de l'État d'être neutre et le fait religieux. Et le fait religieux, à des moments, devient très intense, à des moments, devient complètement apaisé, et c'est un débat constant que nous avons. Jefferson, par exemple, aux États-Unis, lorsqu'il a déclaré qu'il fallait séparer l'Église et l'État, disait quelque chose de révolutionnaire pour son temps. Et ça a été structurant pour la suite. Au Québec, dans les années 60, au début des années 60, l'Église catholique était extrêmement puissante. Et l'histoire du Québec, et d'ailleurs l'histoire du mouvement indépendantiste, qui était très liée à la volonté de faire reculer le pouvoir de l'Église catholique, ça a été notre histoire depuis 1960. Graduellement, faire en sorte que ce ne soit pas les catholiques ou les protestants, mais les laïcs qui contrôlent les hôpitaux, les écoles, l'aménagement urbain. Et donc, cette volonté des Québécois de bien distinguer entre l'Église et l'État, elle fait partie de notre histoire et de nos valeurs. Et sur la question de l'égalité des hommes et des femmes, évidemment, une des raisons pour lesquelles des femmes de plus de 40 ans étaient si engagées dans le débat sur la laïcité, c'est parce qu'elles avaient vécu la misogynie de l'Église catholique dans les années 50 et 60 et qu'elles s'en étaient libérées. Et pour eux, c'est un élément essentiel de leur propre histoire.
Ok, merci.
Merci.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Adeline. Je vais aussi poser ma question en français. Alors, vous avez mentionné que le Parti québécois d'aujourd'hui, ce n'était pas le même que celui qui était à sa création. Alors, ma question, c'est quand et comment allez-vous décider d'inclure des gens de minorités visibles et issus des différentes religions dans votre administration pour qu'ils se sentent à l'aise et puis qu'ils sentent qu'ils aient la même probabilité de se rendre où est-ce que vous vous êtes rendu vous-même?
Eh bien, je vous remercie. Bon, d'abord, ça a été le cas dès le départ. Le premier député noir de l'histoire du Québec, c'était Jean Alfred, député du Parti québécois en 1976. Et maintenant, il y a Makakoto de Bourget. J'ai embauché, lève-toi Evelyne Abitbol, qui est née au Maroc, était candidate du Parti québécois et maintenant ma conseillère spéciale pour la diversité. Jennifer Drouin, Jennifer, tu veux te lever? Jennifer, maintenant, dirige Anglos for Quebec Independence, un mouvement que je salue énormément. On fait des embauches, on veut avoir des candidats de la diversité. On est engagé dans un travail extrêmement actif, de grande volonté politique, d'augmenter la présence de la diversité au sein du Parti québécois, mais aussi, j'ai dit au premier ministre que c'était incorrect qu'il y ait seulement 5 à 7 % de membres de la diversité dans la fonction publique québécoise, alors que sa juste représentation serait au moins 11 %. Et je pense qu'on doit tous avoir la volonté politique d'aller vers là. Et moi, je suis chef du Parti québécois depuis 3 mois, et déjà, j'ai pris plusieurs mesures. Et mademoiselle, vous êtes bienvenue au Parti québécois.
Merci beaucoup. Bonne journée.
Hi, I'm Pamela, and I'm a communications student. And my question for you is, we know that before you were a journalist and an author, so why did you change direction? Why did you choose to become a Parti Québécois politician?
Well, I was a reader of Tintin when I was young, and it seemed to be a good life. Not many women in his life, I have to say, but... he never seemed to take notes. I never saw him write. Never kept his receipts to be refunded. But so this I had to learn by doing the trade. I'm very curious in nature. I want to know things. And as a journalist in France and in the United States, I switched from wanting to learn scoops to wanting to understand how society works, and then focusing on innovations to make things better. And as I worked more and more trying to find innovations to make things work better, I said that the only way to implement these things was to be in a political party and in government. At the end, whatever you think of the way you want to change the world, and you can change the world in many ways as an entrepreneur, as a community organizer, as a citizen, in the end, structural change has to come from a government that decides to do the structural change. And I was close to the independence movement since I was a teenager. So when I came back from being a foreign correspondent and writing a few books, and in '94, I thought independence was at hand, and I said, well, I don't want to be a spectator anymore, I want to be an actor, and that's why I became an advisor to the premier. Then I went back to university, à l'Université de Montréal, and created what is the CERIUM, the Centre d'études de Relations Internationales, for 8 years. And then I was asked back to be a candidate, and I decided to plunge.
Thank you, merci.
Hi, my name is Piero, and I'm a pure and applied science student. And my question is, if Quebec separates from Canada, how do you think we will survive as an independent nation in the first 10 years?
Pretty well. Now, this is, for all the potholes we have here, this is one of the wealthiest places on earth, okay? We have a strong economy, very diversified. We have natural resources. We have the skills that we have in your head. I mean, when I wrote my first book was about how the U.S. viewed the rise of nationalism and the independence movement from Kennedy to Reagan, and I got hold of a policy paper written by the State Department, the CIA, Treasury, the Pentagon in '77 after the PQ took power in '76. And it was a remarkable document. It's in the book, In the Eye of the Eagle. I'm sure you have a copy in the library here. And it says, listen, there is no question about the viability economically of an independent Quebec or on the fact that it's going to be a reasonable member of the family of nations. That's the conclusion. And that was the conclusion in '77. When the economy was weaker, when our trade was weaker, when we didn't produce video games, and now we have them. And so there's no question. The only question is that in the transition period, how will we achieve the transition period? I believe that every year in Quebec, because we don't have our fair share of federal productive investment, we're losing 35,000 good jobs. So in the first year of independent Quebec, we're going to have our fair share because we're going to keep it. So I think structurally, we're going to be richer, better, quicker if we're independent. And that's beyond the freedom to be at the international events on environment and speak our own minds instead of being in the corridor and saying, well, you know what the Canadian guy says, we don't agree, And that's what we've been doing for the last 15 years. We'd like to be at the table and contribute.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jazz, and I'm a student in psychology. So my question concerns la Charte des droits et des valeurs. And okay, so you said in a previous interview with La Presse, I think, that Pauline Marois, when she took this project, she took it one step, a big, huge step, which should have been gradually instead.
That's right.
So my question is, as a Muslim student, how would you do it gradually without excluding people who actually have the skills but would not give up their religious signs? How would you do that without making them feel undesirable and not good enough just because they have a religious sign on?
Secularism is a rule that you apply to all. When we decided, for instance, it was back in 1998. Were you born?
Yeah.
Yes. So you will remember this. In 1998, we decided that the school boards, who were Protestant and Catholic, would become linguistic, Anglo and French. And so religion would no longer be a variable. Now, there are some Protestants and some Catholics that felt that, it was an acquired right. They had the right. And then we were taking this right away from Protestants and Catholics. Well, he said, yeah, but why should the religious criteria predominate on the civil criteria? And finally, it passed. Now we're discussing whether or not people who have authority and work for the state should be neutral in their appearance. And I say neutral religiously, socially, politically. When I go to get my permit to drive, I don't want to know if the civil servant likes whales or tar sands or the Pope or Islam or Greenpeace. I shouldn't have to know that. He's working for me as a whole, and he should not be wearing a sign of any conviction during work hours. Outside of work hours, of course, he does what he wants. And in England, there was a vegetarian that said, this is a very deep belief in my life, to be a vegetarian. And I can't express it in some way at work. Whereas my colleagues who have strong religious beliefs and even weak religious beliefs can express it. It's not fair. And the judge said, you're right. I mean, the criteria, if we give the right to express convictions, everyone should be on an equal footing. So then you have the choice. If you want to be just, you leave everyone show their strong belief, whatever they are, or you say when you work for the state, you just don't. I prefer not knowing that someone likes tar sands. I prefer not knowing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Pascal, and I'm in General Social Science. And my question is, where do you see Indigenous peoples and their tradition fitting into your ideal Quebec?
Mm-hmm. There's a great documentary that was out recently that is called L'Empreinte, the imprint, that shows how Indigenous history, culture, and ways of doing things is really embedded in the whole of Quebec reality today, and I strongly suggest it. René Lévesque was the first in Canada to recognize the existence on the province territory of 11 native nations. You see, these are nations, and we didn't conquer them. We arrived here and we made pacts with them, most of them. And when you read the history of Champlain, that's a must read. I mean, how Champlain came, and the first thing he did was to be greeted by natives who were close to Tadoussac, and he became a friend, and it was a kind of co-development of natives and the French here in Quebec, which was very different from the experience, of course, in Latin America and in the U.S. So we have a special history, and there are a lot of drawbacks and a lot of mistakes that were done all along the way. But clearly the cornerstone is to recognize their place as nations. And when Quebec becomes independent, it shouldn't put these nations in jeopardy for what they already have. And I think they have to choose themselves the setup that they want. Some of them have relationships with the federal government. If they want to keep it, that's fine. We think that over time, they should transition to a relationship just with Quebec, but that's not for us to decide. It's for them to decide. And one thing that struck me very much, back in 1992, there was a proposal to reform the Canadian Constitution that was very far-reaching in transforming the way that Native nations were governed. Now, under the Indian Act, they're considered like pupils of the nation. Now, it's a very demeaning act. In 1992, it would have been transformed to give them real autonomy. Native population in the rest of Canada voted no, because it was a step in the unknown. Natives in Quebec voted yes. They were ready for this change. And I think this bodes well, if we get out of Canada, for our ability here to find a better way, a more optimal way of respecting their autonomy and be the co-developers of this part of North America.
Thank you.
Before the next question, I just want to say that we're going to finish the questions in line and we won't add any more questions in the line.
Hello, my name is Ben. I'm a student in liberal arts. I just want to say before I ask my question, thank you for speaking in English. It makes it more accessible. By the time the PQ government may be in power next time around, measures for legalizing marijuana will probably already be underway. Mm-hmm. Is this something that a PQ government and an independent Quebec would embrace or be against?
Well, I'm really saddened by the fact that the Trudeau government wants to legalize marijuana, because this was one of my main arguments for Quebec independence. I say that there was a clear consensus in Quebec to move forward, and under the Harper government, there is nowhere to be seen, you know. I say, if you want to have legalized pot, vote yes to independence. So I don't have this argument anymore. So yes, we're in favor, and we think la Société des alcools du Québec, I think that the Quebec state should regulate the quality, the production, the level of toxicity, the sale to only adults and not minors, and take organized crime out of the drug market for marijuana. So yes, you can stay, you'll still have your pot.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sue. I'm in health science. So I know that recently you went to l'Outaouais for a talk about a new medical school opening up over there. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering, so what are your thoughts on being bilingual in the medical field, and especially hospitals, and also in terms of people who refuse to offer services to people who are Anglophone?
Well, I think, you know, there's a rule in Quebec that when you're an Anglophone, wherever you are on the territory, you can have access to medical care in English. And that's a fundamental rule, and it has to stay. You know, in Gaspésie, for instance, there's a group of older unilingual Anglos. They're being taken care of in English because although it's a majority Francophone area, the hospital there is designated as having to provide medical care in English. And in a speech I wrote for Lucien Bouchard back in 1996 at the Centaur, he said a phrase that became very controversial in some circles, some nationalist circles, but I keep repeating it because I love controversy. When you go to the hospital, you may need a blood test, but you don't need a language test. And I think that's profoundly true. Now, for the medical school, the university medical school in Gatineau, the problem is that it's a French medical school, and for the first year, the courses will be in English. What gives? You know, if you want to have medical school in English, you go to McGill. If you want to have medical school in French, when you go to French universities that give medical school, and the one in Gatineau should be in French. And you know, the funny thing about it is that if you cross the river to the University of Ottawa, they have full medical school in French, and not in Gatineau. That's it.
Thank you.
Bonjour, mon nom est Karim et je suis en International Business. Donc, ma question c'est la suivante. C'est avec tout ce qui s'est passé récemment à Québec, avec la Charte des valeurs, j'aimerais savoir quelle est votre position par rapport à l'article qui a été publié dans le Washington Post qui disait que le Québec est plus raciste que les autres provinces du Canada.
Vous savez, il y a des statistiques sur les crimes haineux. Il y en a au Québec. Il y en a moins qu'en Ontario, en Alberta, en Colombie-Britannique. Okay? On est un des endroits au monde qui est le plus pacifique, qui est le plus ouvert et où il y a le moins de haine. Est-ce qu'il y a de la haine? Oui. Est-ce qu'il y a du racisme? Oui. Est-ce qu'il y a de la discrimination? Oui. Est-ce qu'il y a du sentiment anti-musulman? Oui. Est-ce qu'il faut agir avec force pour que ce soit beaucoup mieux que maintenant? Absolument. Mais d'aller dire que le Québec, qui est un havre de paix, est systémiquement raciste, etc., c'est de l'intolérance envers le Québec. Et j'étais très heureux de voir qu'un ancien conseiller de Stephen Harper, Carl Vallée, a écrit une réplique dans le Washington Post hier, disant exactement le contraire. Et c'est la liberté d'expression. On peut être intolérant envers le Québec, on peut être tolérant, on peut se contredire, et j'étais content de voir que les lecteurs du Washington Post ont pu avoir les deux côtés de la médaille, mais c'est sûr que les fact-checkers n'ont pas fait leur travail dans le premier texte.
Merci.
Bonjour, je suis en sciences humaines générales et je m'appelle Lina. Et ma question pour vous, c'est je voulais savoir comment allez-vous inclure les immigrants dans votre mouvement indépendantiste alors que la plupart d'entre eux ne sont pas chez eux au Québec et préfèrent dire qu'ils sont Canadiens au lieu de Québécois.
Ben, il y a beaucoup de francophones qui se disent Canadiens. Hein? La raison pour laquelle le référendum n'est pas passé en 1995, c'est pas parce que des Québécois d'origine immigrante ont voté non. C'est parce que 30% des francophones ont voté non. C'est ça la raison. Bon. Et moi, dans ma famille, j'ai des gens qui disent, ben, je suis Québécois, mais je suis d'abord Canadien, j'aime le Canada, puis je veux y rester. Je dis, écoute, vote libéral, puis vote non. C'est ça la démocratie. Hein? La question, c'est, est-ce qu'il y a un moment où on va avoir plus que 50% des gens qui vont vouloir faire du Québec un pays? Les indépendantistes ont respecté la démocratie. 2 fois, on a eu un référendum. 2 fois, ça a voté non. On a dit, on reste. Mais en 1995, il y a 13 régions du Québec qui ont voté oui. 13 régions du Québec. On aurait pu dire, les 13 régions s'en vont. Ça n'aurait pas été gentil parce qu'il y a plusieurs comtés à Montréal où le oui a eu 72% des voix francophones. Non, c'est le Québec en entier qui reste ou le Québec en entier qui parle. Pourquoi ça revient? Je sens votre sous-question. Puisqu'on a voté non 2 fois. Bon. Parce qu'à chaque fois qu'on a voté non, les leaders du fédéralisme ont dit, votez non, ça va changer. Votez non, on va avoir des changements majeurs pour que le Québec soit plus respecté à l'intérieur du Canada. Votez non, puis la Constitution du Canada, qui a été écrite sans vous et contre vous, va être réparée. Ben, elle n'a pas été réparée. Il n'y a eu aucune proposition. Et encore aujourd'hui, on est le 150e anniversaire du Canada cette année. Il y a 3 ans, quand il a été élu, le premier ministre Couillard, Canadien jusqu'à la moelle épinière, a dit que ce serait une bonne chose que pour le 150e, on puisse modifier la Constitution pour que le Québec puisse la signer. Et M. Harper, et M. Trudeau, et Mme Wynne, et les autres ont dit, pas question. On ne veut pas parler de ça. Ça ne nous intéresse pas. Pour l'avenir prévisible, la loi fondamentale du Canada n'aura pas été acceptée par le Québec.
Vous n'avez pas répondu à ma question, mais c'est pas grave.
Vous voulez savoir? Ben, je vais essayer. I'm going to try and do better.
Bonjour, moi je m'appelle Luce, je suis à Law, Society and Justice, le programme de droit en fait. Vous avez parlé beaucoup des immigrants et du racisme. J'aimerais poser une question par rapport à comment allez-vous faire pour intégrer un immigrant nouvellement arrivé dans le secteur qui a eu beaucoup d'expérience dans son pays et aussi par rapport à la culture québécoise?
Ben, écoutez, normalement, ça dépend de son âge. Hein. S'il est en âge d'aller à l'école, l'école doit l'intégrer à la culture québécoise. Mais c'est certain qu'en ce moment, bon, par exemple, moi, quand j'étais ministre des Relations internationales, donc il y a 4 ans, je dis, ben, je regarde les diplômés qui sont au Québec d'origine étrangère, la majorité viennent de Tunisie, Maroc et Algérie. Et donc, il faudrait faire des ententes avec les ordres professionnels de ces pays-là pour reconnaître les équivalences. C'est-à-dire, si vous êtes un plombier, un médecin, un ingénieur qui est venu du Maroc, quand on fait l'équivalence avec notre diplôme ici ou notre pratique ici, ben vous êtes équivalent ou il vous manque 1 an, ou il vous manque un examen, ou il vous manque un stage. Pour qu'au point d'entrée, les gens le sachent et que les gens qui sont déjà ici disent, OK, bon, maintenant, on a le mode d'emploi pour avoir notre équivalence. Malheureusement, lorsque les libéraux sont arrivés, ils n'ont pas poursuivi ces négociations-là. Donc, on a perdu 3 ans. Puis on les a fait avec les Français. On a 80 ententes d'équivalence avec des métiers, des professions en France. Donc, on sait comment le faire. C'est une question de volonté politique. Moi, j'ai la volonté politique de le faire. Deuxièmement, on sait qu'il y a un groupe qui s'appelle Qualification Montréal, ici, qui a développé une pratique de reconnaissance des qualifications intensives sur 1 an avec du financement. Donc, plutôt que de dire à la personne, bon, ben, il faut que tu trouves une job, il faut que tu nourrisses tes enfants, donc trouve-toi une job, puis le soir, les fins de semaine, essaie de te mettre à niveau. On a dit, non, regarde, on va te donner de l'aide financière. Pendant 1 an, tu vas te concentrer sur ta qualification, tu vas l'avoir, puis ensuite, ben, tu paieras des impôts parce que tu auras une bonne job. Alors, nous, on dit, ben, ce que fait Qualification Québec, ça devrait être mieux connu, mieux financé, étendu à tout le Québec. C'est pas qu'on ne sait pas comment le faire. On sait comment le faire. Il faut avoir la volonté politique de le faire. Nous, on l'a.
D'accord, merci.
Merci.
Thank you for letting me asking you a question. I'm Dr. Blair. I'm a family physician from Dorval, and I've just signed a 3-year contract with affordable non-profit medical firm in California. And I might have to be witness of a Calexit by 2019 if they get their 500,000 petition. And I'm going in a Butte County, which is Republican. My question is, I'd like to suggest another author, Mr. Noyer, who wrote on free laws for religion from Voltaire's Revolution papers. And he englobed pretty well the idea of what's the difference between interculturalism and multiculturalism. Could you elaborate on what is the difference? Because I know that Quebec is more towards interculturalism, like doctors we are like to be professionals, that's it. Thank you.
Well, that's a great debate. You know, when multiculturalism was introduced by Pierre Trudeau, the father of Justin, it was seen as an idea that the state would encourage people of different cultures to keep the different cultures, to better then become Canadians in a mosaic. When you cross the frontier to the United States, where they have the notion of melting pot, which is the opposite, you see that however you call it, you go to Boston or to New York, and you have the Jewish district and the Russian district and the Italian district and the Polish district, and even though they say it's a melting pot, I mean, in fact, original cultures do stay and thrive and continue, and that's a great thing. But they all are Americans. I mean, for them, that was the point, to be an American, and it's the first thing that they will say, and it gives cohesion to the United States beyond this immigrant country based on immigrants. So here, the Canadian experience wanted to do something different. And now Justin Trudeau is the embodiment of the fulfillment of this idea when he told the New York Times in an interview last year, there are no core values in Canada except being kind to each other and contributing. There is no core value. And we're in a post-national state. So it's a way of seeing things. And if it suits English Canada well, I have no quarrel with that. But in Quebec, where we're a minority nation in North America, we're 2% of this Anglo-North America, and we're trying to create a unique experience that is neither the melting pot, and we have core values, and we have distinct history, and we have a distinct language, and we have distinct culture. That's not the path we choose to take. And so, yes, there will always be, Little Italy and Chinatown, and people will keep, and unfortunately, they're funded by the state, and that's fine. But no, we want to have more closeness and a community of purpose as a very original experiment in North America that has its warts and its beauty spots, but that is us. And we want everyone to share in that and to build that and to transform that in the generations to come. It was so great to be here with you. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for listening. And I hope for the best. Bye.